Hi everyone, Matt here from Proof Fly Fishing. Welcome back. In today's video we are going to finish up all of the wrapping of our rod. So what we're going to focus on today are ferrule wraps. We're going to talk about how long they need to be, what their function is, and then we're going to demonstrate how to actually wrap those. That can be a little bit tricky. Then we're going to move to stripping guides, the largest guides on your rod. Again, those can be just a little bit tricky if the foot is not perfectly ground, but there's a few tricks we can use to make that a little bit easier. And we're going to finish up the video today with talking about wrapping winding checks. How do you do it? Why do you do it? And we'll also talk briefly about hook keepers as well. Alright, we're going to switch to a close-up video now, and we'll get started. Hi everyone, welcome back. We are all set to wrap our first ferrule. We're going to start by wrapping the female ferrules, and the reason we do this is to add a little extra support in that area so it handles the stress of casting a little bit better. Now, how long do you need a ferrule wrap to be is kind of a debatable thing. The kind of rule that most people go by is 1.5 times the diameter of the section that you're wrapping. So in this case we're looking at, I don't know, somewhere a little shy of 1/2 inch. So we'll just get started here. We start basically where we want that ferrule wrap to end, and we wrap toward the end of the blank. Our setup is exactly the same. We have our thread coming out of our book, and we're going to come over top of the blank, just like we're wrapping a guide on, with maybe 4 inches or so off the back. Bring it underneath the blank, and where it meets the thread coming off the book, we're going to cross it over and then just rotate that rod backward just a little bit, and that's going to lock that wrap into place. And you can maneuver it around a little bit. We're going to do the same thing. Put our thumb on that wrap, pull that thread under the blank. Where it crosses the tension thread, just rotate that rod, and now we're on. I'm going to bring in my burnishing tool here. Now, if you'll notice positioning here, I'm using the sig jig here. This is the end of one of the uprights. So the blank is not being supported obviously on this end because we're wrapping on it. And I'm actually using the outrigger 2 on the far end. So I have 3 supports on this blank, just helping me stabilize it because the piece I'm working on is obviously hanging off here, and it just helps things work a little bit better. So we're going to start rotating, and I'm just going to kind of pack that thread into place as we go. Again, we're leading that wrap just a little bit so that we don't get any overlap. And we'll just kind of speed things up here a little bit. Cut that tag end anytime we want. We'll take care of that now with a razor blade. You notice we've got a little bit of gap there, nothing to worry about. We'll close that up when we get done with the wrap. We're going to pause, pack those wraps into place, just like we're wrapping a guide. Nothing different here, only we're just wrapping an empty blank. Again, nothing wrong with creating a gap there to keep from overlapping and then packing it into place. As long as that wrap stays tight, it's perfectly fine. See, I got a little bit of an overlap there. Just pull it off. Stop, pack those wraps into place. And we're getting closer to the end here. You want to kind of keep an eye on that. And just like when we're wrapping a guide, when we get 5 to 7 wraps from the end, we're going to install a pull loop. I'll go ahead and do that now. So I've got a pretty short tag end here. I probably should have left a longer one, but we'll make it work. So here's our loop. It's going under the wrap, facing in the direction that we're actually wrapping. Just like that. And now we're going to kind of slow down a little bit. We're going to make each wrap very targeted as far as our spacing goes, and we're going to pack everything as we go because we're just running out of room in the end. So every turn gets packed into place. You can see we've got a little sliver of the blank showing through there. It's not a big deal. It's going to be very careful when you pack this. You want to get that as close as you can. Don't be afraid to kind of pop off the end of the blank and rewrap just to get a little practice. That's okay. That's about as close as I can get. Now I've got a little bit of a sliver there. And it's not a big deal. It's almost impossible to get all the way to the edge. So we're going to stop there. I'm going to put my thumb over that thread. I'm going to cut it. And just like wrapping a guide, we're going to feed that loose end through the loop. Pull it tight and kind of line it up with the rest of the guide, with the rest of that wrap. Grab those loose ends, pull it through. We're going to take our razor blade, lay it flat on the wrap, saw it off. Now what you want to pay attention to is that the back of this is nice and square. Make sure that the front is even. It doesn't have to go all the way to the end. In fact, it's very difficult to get it all the way to the end, if not impossible. Make sure it's a nice even line, and you can achieve that by packing it in. Another trick here, if you're using dark thread, if it's important to you to have no blank showing, you can take a Sharpie and just kind of blacken out the end there, and it'll have the appearance of going all the way to the end. But that's up to you. We're going to move on now to how to wrap a guide that might fall very close to the ferrule. Okay, we're back. One thing you're going to encounter at some point, if you wrap enough rods, is that the placement of one of your guides is going to end up extremely close to the end of the ferrule. Not to worry, it's actually kind of a nice thing, because what you do is you get to wrap this guide and a ferrule wrap all at once, kind of simplifying the process for you. The only difference here is that where you're going to start this wrap is actually where you end it on a normal guide. So we're going to start it right where that guide starts to lift off the blank. Again, we're going to come under where it crosses. We're going to cross that thread over, come under again, and once we're on, we can, this one's being a little tricky, so we'll push it over a third time. There we go. And now we're locked in. So start that guide right next to where it lifts off, and then just continue on like normal. And if you watched the ferrule wrap just a minute ago, all we're going to do is continue on this guide foot, come off the guide foot, get as close, 5 or 7 wraps from the end, install our pull loop, and tie it off like normal. And then you've got a nice solid wrap all the way across. Okay, we're going to wrap a stripping guide on now. We're going to tape it and space it just like we do other guides. I'm just putting tape on one side here just to be able to show you a couple things. I'm also going to do a simple trim band on this one. There's a lot of different ways to do trim bands. This one I'm doing because I'm going to use color preserver on it. I'm not worried about the tag end of this trim band showing through the wrap because we're going to make it opaque. But what you'll notice here is I have two pieces of tape, one here and one behind the guide, and I've strung a black piece of thread between them. And I've got, I don't know, maybe 3 inches here. Basically you want about 4 inches or so in front of where the guide foot is that you're wrapping. You want that much slack so you can work with it for the trim band. So we're going to use a different color. I'm going to use red for our main color, and then we're going to have a black trim band. So the only thing tricky about wrapping stripping guides is that they tend to have, because they're larger, and if you're not able to grind down that foot to get a perfect taper on it, you can have just a small bump there. And so what I want to do is kind of wrap this one and show you how I deal with that if I'm not able, if it's a black guide or something, and if I were to file it down, it would be a different color, or, you know, if it's just something I don't feel like dealing with. So to get started, we're just going to hop right on our guide. We're going to wrap right over top of that piece that we have on the blank. Just pretend like it's not even there. Start, 2 or 3 wraps before that guide foot. Go under the blank, cross your thread, push it over. We'll go under the blank again, cross over. We'll do it one more time. Under the blank, cross over, and now we're on. We're going to pack this thread a little bit. And we're going to actually lift that thread a little bit onto the guide foot. Even if you have to kind of lift it up and put it on that guide foot, that's fine. But kind of get it up there maybe less than a 1/16 of an inch, a 32nd of an inch or so. So there's a little gap between where you started the thread and where your current wrap is. And we're just going to wrap that a couple times. You can pack as you go, and if it slips off that foot, that's not a big deal, because we're just going to put the next one up on the foot too. And if it slips off, that's fine. We're coming to our tag end here, which we're going to cut so that doesn't get in our way. And again, save that tag piece because we're going to need it later to tape off or to tie off. Pack as we go. And we've got our gap there. And we're going to wrap 2 or 3, sometimes a little bit more, with that gap in place. So we're kind of building up a little thread wrap, anticipating closing it in just a minute. So I've got 3 wraps there. I'm going to do one more. And now what I'm going to do is just close that gap. And I'm going to do that by packing those wraps in very carefully. And if you notice, that gap has now entirely disappeared. And even though the foot on this stripping guide is less than perfect, I'm getting a clean, smooth transition from where I started the thread up the guide foot. So now we just continue on. Stopping to pack as we go. And actually not going to finish this whole wrap. I'm going to tie it off so I can show you how to do that trim band. So I'm going to install my pull loop. Under the thread, do a few quick turns over top of it to tie it off. Pack everything in place. Put our thumb back there, cut our thread. Through the loop. Pull everything tight. Okay, so we've got our wrap here. Now let's talk about our trim band. We've got two pieces here. And the reason I stopped this wrap early is because what I want to show you is once you get that wrap maybe halfway over the guide foot, you'll want to stop and cut off your trim band piece because we don't want that sticking through on the far end. So we'll trim that off and then we just keep wrapping as we go. We'll cut this tag end off too so it's not confusing. So now we have the black piece of thread well secured underneath the wrap and it's coming off in front of the guide. So I'm going to take this front piece of tape off. I'm just going to free up the tag end of that wrap. And before I even put a single wrap down, what I'm going to do is install a pull loop in the opposite direction. So here's my black thread, my trim band. I'm going to put my pull loop in, and with just holding that thread in place, I'm going to wrap over top of it using my fingers as the tension, and I'm going to wrap over that pull loop. Generally, I don't know, 3 or 4 turns makes for a nice trim band. I'll do 4 in this case just because it's a stripping guide and I like it to be a little more pronounced. When I get where I want it to go, again, I just hold my finger over that. No need to cut it this time. And I slip it through that pull loop. I'll show you that in just a second. Now it's through the pull loop. I grab those 2 tag ends of my loop, pull it through. Before I cut that, I just pack it in place. Just like that. Now we've got a nice trim band on our stripping guide. You can do this on all your guides if you want. Very carefully cut that off. And there you go. Last thing we're going to do here is the winding check. Nothing too tricky about it, but I just want to show you. We'll switch to that right now. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is how to wrap in front of a winding check. Now the winding check here is glued into place, and so what we want to do is put a little bit of thread coming off the winding check and forward. And the reason we do that is because later when we seal the wraps, we're going to seal the thread. We'll put a little varnish on top of this thread, over top of the winding check, and a little bit onto the cork. And that's going to create a watertight seal so that even if our handle is submerged, that we're not going to get water underneath the cork. So start off, I like to start off right next to the winding check. We'll tie on just like we've done before. And once we're on, I like to pack those threads. Now this winding check fits pretty tight. Some of them will not. If you can get a little bit of thread underneath that winding check, that's fine. That's only going to help create a good seal. And so we just keep wrapping. This one's slipping on me a little bit, so we'll do another wrap. There we go. Another nice thing about packing that thread under there is that it ensures you don't have any gaps between the winding check and the thread that you might see a little bit later. You can do trim bands here. You can do something that is traditional in bamboo rods, like a signature wrap, kind of a unique wrap that's yours. You can do an open spiral for a more vintage look. You know, whatever you feel like doing here is, you know, is up to you. If you want to do a hook keeper, you can put it pretty much anywhere. You want to make sure if you do have a stripping guide further up the blank that you make sure you align that generally on the bottom of the blank, which would be in alignment with the guides. But you wrap that just like you would a snake guide, tape it in place, and then just wrap up the feet. So nothing too tricky, but I wanted to show you. In our next video, we are going to be polishing these wraps. We're going to talk about color preserver, and then we're going to go ahead and seal the wraps with varnish. All right, we'll see you next time.